Good morning, everyone. This is Seth, and welcome to Thrift Store Tech. I just wanted to take the opportunity to shoot a little quick video talking about the thrift store that I love the most, and that would be called the Goodwill Clearance Center, and some other areas might know it as the Goodwill Outlet store. A lot of people just kind of colloquial call it the bins, but basically it's where unsold merchandise from Goodwill goes to die. The stuff that's sat on the shelf for Lord knows how long ends up going there, and it's kind of the last ditch stop before it goes to landfill or something. And I say that, but there's a flip side to that too, where Goodwill gets millions upon millions of items donated every year, I'm sure, possibly billions even. And sometimes they just don't have the staff to process all those donations at whatever store or center they get dropped off at. So when they get too overwhelmed, sometimes they'll send those items over to the Goodwill Clearance Center rather than try to deal with all of these things. And that's really where the fun treasure hunt comes in, because when it comes through there, sometimes, especially if it's items that they haven't had the time to really process and cherry pick the really good stuff from, it ends up landing there. And I have seen and found stuff at the Goodwill Clearance Center that I would never expect to see in a thrift store. I have found in the past a couple of Odyssey 2 units that were working. And if you don't know what that is, it's a very early computer/gaming system from the 1980s. I once found a Model Odyssey 1, which is even rarer to come by. There was another time I actually found a working Nintendo Virtual Boy in one of the bins, and it's just unbelievable the stuff that turns up. And I live in Nevada, southern Nevada. We used to have two Goodwill clearance centers. One was a lot closer to me. I really liked the layout of it. But when COVID hit, of course, Goodwill was deemed a non-essential business, and that store closed and never reopened. Thankfully, we do still have one. It's across town from me. It's about a 25 to 30-minute drive, but I tend to go at least once a week, sometimes more if I can swing it. But basically, pretty much everything is $2.09 a pound. And that includes clothes, hard goods, that sort of thing. Books and media have their own prices depending on what they are. Children's books are a quarter, softbacks are 49 cents, hardbacks are 99 cents, that sort of thing, and just kind of all over the place with media. And if it's something heavier like a piece of furniture or electronics, they'll usually weigh it, and if it's over 5 pounds, they'll give you a deal on it. They might say, "Oh, this is $4.99, this is $2.99, this is $8.99." That's pretty much how it works. And I love going there. It's kind of spoiled me for other thrift stores because the prices are that good. And that's where a lot of the stuff that I feature on this little show comes from. And I've understood in the past that different states have different ways of handling this setup, but pretty much they all have a Goodwill Clearance Center in one form or another. And it was probably about 10 years ago, I was visiting a friend in Arizona, and I got the chance to go to one in Phoenix, and it was a lot bigger than what I was used to. It's also a lot grungier than what I was used to. And that's something else I'll say, is that if you crave cleanliness, order, and distinct pricing on your items, the Goodwill Clearance Center is not for you. When people call it the bins, they mean it. Basically, the whole store is rows upon rows of shallow blue bins, and you dig. And you're going to go through a lot of dirt, a lot of crap, a lot of garbage before you find something really good. And it's a numbers game. It comes down to how often you go. And really, every time I go, one of my goals is to find at least one thing that I can sell on eBay that's going to pay for my trip there. And by and large, I do. By and large, I actually come out pretty well ahead usually. But I had the chance, getting back to the point of this whole story, I had the chance last week. I had to make a quick 2-day trip out to Texas to deal with a little family matter. And while I was down there, I took care of that family matter on the day that I arrived, and then I had another day where my flight wasn't leaving until 10:40 p.m., which that flight actually wound up getting screwed up, and I wound up not leaving until the next morning at 6 a.m. That was a fun night. But either way, I got the chance to visit two different Goodwill Clearance Centers. And one was in, I think it was Littleton, and another one was in Fort Worth. Excuse me. And I knew that each state kind of worked a little differently, but the Arizona one wasn't all that different from the one where I live in Nevada. So I wasn't quite sure what to expect. And let me tell you, the Texas bins were different. The first one I went to, it was on the side of a normal store, which I've heard that before, so it wasn't really a surprise. But you walked into this little front area, and there were the registers and a couple of bins of media and books and such. Then you walked into this massive room. This thing is the size of a warehouse. And maybe 1/8 of it, if that much, was actually open to people. And there were maybe 10 rows of the bins mixed up with clothes and hard goods, which is more or less the way mine operates, except with a lot more bins and half the store is clothes and half the store is hard goods, or, just general merchandise. And I was just kind of watching everybody else for the lead on this one because I didn't know what I was doing. And like I said, every store kind of has their own rules. But this one I found interesting because the workers have this massive area where they're processing tons of donations. And the way they do it is they have these big boxes, these big lifters that dump the boxes into the bins. So every few minutes I was hearing the crash of a bunch of stuff getting dumped into more bins. And the way this particular Goodwill worked, or this particular Goodwill Clearance Center worked, is I came out and I saw a sign that said, bins rotating, next options available at like 12:30 p.m. and it was around 10 a.m. I think. And I was a little discouraged, but then I realized people were going through the bins that were out. And what I finally realized is that about every 15 or 20 minutes or so, they would pull one of those rows of bins away, take it to the back, and roll out a new set of bins. And they just kind of kept this up rotating. So it was a smaller selection than I was used to being able to go through, and I really generally don't bother with the clothing bins unless something really jumps out at me, which isn't very often. But they kept bringing out different bins, and the Goodwill that I'm used to, basically they will rotate the bins in half the store, and while they're rotating, that half is off limits. And there's a big red line across the middle of the floor, and you stay on the side of that red line that's not being rotated until those bins are in place and the manager tells you, okay, go. And then it's kind of a feeding frenzy. This one operated a little differently. When the new bins came out, there were red lines running parallel to the bins, and people went and stood behind those lines, and you waited for the employee to say, all right, people, line up behind the red line, and 3, and 2, and 1, and shop, and boom, they dive in on those bins. Which, it wasn't quite as crazy as what I'm used to because of the limited amount of space. And since I was on a trip and I was limited on how much I could bring back, I really didn't go quite as crazy as I usually do at the bins. I did still end up spending just around $20 between the two locations, which I've already made back by flipping a certain special something that I found. So I'm actually probably ahead at least $40 after what I spent. So yay, free stuff from the bins. So that was that one. And when I was heading out, I actually had a couple of items that were really heavy. I'm a teacher, as is my main job, and I found a couple of sets of wooden pieces for forming letters. It's from a series called Handwriting Without Tears. If you know, you know. But these individual sets on Amazon sell for $42 a piece new. I found 5 complete sets in their original boxes, and I took it up to the front. And all I had noticed in the front coming in was a sign that said $2.79 a pound, which I kind of went, that's 70 cents more than home. Oh, well, whatever. And I was getting ready to ring it up, and I'm prepared for this to come out in the neighborhood of $14 to $15 because I had, or no, a little higher than that. I was expecting it to come out in the neighborhood of $20 to $21 because I had about 7 pounds altogether. And the lady rings it up, And she gives me a total, and I was surprised by how cheap it was. Turns out the $2.79 was for linens, fabric, clothes, that sort of thing. The hard goods, which was all I had, all I usually have, were $1.29 a pound. So it wound up being somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 or $9 for everything, which was just a steal of a deal on that load. Uh, anyway, after that, I left because I knew that there was another one. I wasn't sure how far away it was because I'm not used to driving in Texas. I'm used to driving in Nevada, where basically I am in one gigantic city that's spread out like a grid, and you can drive for a good 40 minutes. You're still in the city limits. Texas works very differently. It's a bunch of little neighborhoods all spread out through there. So I looked up the other clearance center. It was in Fort Worth. It was maybe a 40-minute drive, but this was a day where I had nothing but time. So I went ahead and drove over there. And I walked into this one, and again, massive room, except this time there are tons of bins out and people are just digging. And every single bin was clothing. And I got discouraged for just a second, and I went, no, there's got to be more to this. And I turned and saw a little doorway, walked through that doorway, and there was another room, maybe half the size of the clothing room, but it was full of bins of hard goods, just general merchandise. So I went and dug around. I didn't find a whole lot. I did find a couple of very cool things that I'd like to share in a coming video. But thing I was most excited about was a little netbook from the early to mid 2000s. That I love netbooks. I mean, they're really not of very much use today, of course, but for the time, I absolutely loved them. They were just little kind of mini notebooks, kind of, I guess, kind of the equivalent of Chromebooks today in their functionality, because they were only ever really meant for light web browsing, that sort of thing. But anyway, found one of those, and Goodwill policy kind of ranges wildly from store to store when it comes to selling laptops and computers, because of course people donate this stuff all the time without wiping their data, and you don't want sensitive data out there, and they don't want to be responsible for sensitive data falling into the wrong hands. So usually if you take a computer up, it really depends on who's running the register. Sometimes they'll say, oh, I can't sell that to you. Other times they'll say, oh yeah, of course, whatever, I don't care. But I didn't want to take the gamble because I really wanted this little netbook. So I wound up grabbing a backpack and just kind of throwing it in there and just figuring I'll see how much their by pound price is. Turns out their by pound price was $1.89 a pound for everything, just flat rate, which is closer to what I'm used to. And the bag that I had with that netbook, and happened to find a power cord for it, probably not the original one, but one with appropriate specs, and a couple other things. And that bag wound up being, I want to say like 4.5 pounds. So I wound up paying $8 and change for it. And I was just so jazzed about it, and it works. There is somebody else's information on there, which of course I'm just going to erase. But it was just such a cool, fun find to do, and it was just such a great experience to go and see how the bins worked in another state. Like I said, I'd only ever been to the Nevada and Arizona ones, and they were pretty similar. But Texas was a whole other world when it came to it. This is the kind of thing that makes me want to just fly out to another state once a month just to see what other states' Goodwill bins look like. Anyway, if you've never been to the Goodwill bins, a couple of tips going in. First off, like I said, do not expect this to be a regular Goodwill store. It is not. It is a bunch of bins. It is dig and see what you find. And I hesitate to say I promise, but I'm going to promise you, you will find at least one unique thing that you were not expecting to find. The general idea about Goodwill is you walk into the store and you never know what you're going to find because stock's always rotating. It's always dependent on who's donating what that day, that week, that month. The bins, it's even more so. So it's going to be a lot of digging. People can be rude and pushy. I've been pretty lucky overall, but they can be rude and pushy. So if that's not something that you're able to really deal with, again, not for you. And I strongly recommending you bring a small bottle of hand sanitizer. They usually will have some there, but small bottle of hand sanitizer is always a good one to have on you. I recommend you bring your own disposable bag or reusable bag with you. I have about 3 or 4 sitting in my car that I typically take with me, and just use that bag repeatedly until you wear it out. It's it it's the easiest way to carry merchandise around, as they will have shopping carts, but in my experience, the shopping carts are usually taken if you don't get there right at opening or near closing. Um, Again, every Ben's has their own etiquette about certain things. Lastly, definitely wear gloves. Things are dirty. Things are sometimes pretty nasty. I have stuck my hand in things that are best not mentioned in a video. And when I say you never know what you're going to find in those bins, I mean it. I have run across toys of an adult nature, let's just say, that I would not want to touch with my bare hands. Those are the kind of things you just take a golf club and shove to the side because you go, oh my gosh. And a lot of things you kind of wonder who donated this. Dear Lord. There was one time I literally found fecal matter in the bins. And when I realized what it actually was, it was, run to the bathroom, scrub hands, run out, go to the front counter, get hand sanitizer, run back to the bathroom, wash hands again. Because I forgot my gloves that day, of all the days, right? That and I recommend that they be thick gloves if possible, something like gardening gloves, because when you dig, you don't know what's hiding under the surface. I've seen kitchen knives, butcher knives, I've seen broken glass. My wife once actually sliced her hand pretty badly on a piece of either broken glass or a knife blade, I forget what it was, but that kind of scared her off of going for quite a while, which can't say I blame her. I've cut myself a few times there, and it's not a pretty thing. So if you do go, be careful, be patient. Bear in mind that this is not your typical Goodwill store. Things are not priced out individually. Things are not labeled. And I have seen people walk in where it's obviously their first time, and they take one look around and they look at it like, nope. And they just turn around and walk out the door, which I kind of look at it like, hey, okay, bye-bye. Less competition for me. Thanks. But again, like I said, I have found some things there that I just could not believe. I found stuff I would never have expected to see at a Goodwill. And I already gave you some examples of those, and I've got other examples that will be coming up to be shown in future videos. But I just wanted to share that story with you, along with that recommendation of exactly where I tend to go for these sort of things. So anyway, if you have a Goodwill Bins or Goodwill Outlet Center or Goodwill Clearance Center near you, I highly recommend checking it out if you have the disposition for it. So thanks so much for joining me for a little video here. I thought this was going to be a much quicker video than it turned out to be. I'm pushing 20 minutes here. But again, if you have any of your own thrift store tech finds or anything very cool that you found at thrift stores, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a like and a subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. It helps the channel grow a great deal. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.